Hello, and welcome back to more Films Under Constant Critique, where we take a look at films, some good, some bad, and some downright awful. I'm Bongo Baikov, joined by our host Maverick, Dren, Zaria. This week, we are taking a look at two films, The Thing from Another World and The Thing.
This is not a fair fight, I'm gonna say.
It really isn't.
Although, granted, we could have thrown in the Thing prequel.
Yeah, the 2011 one.
Then it would really not be a fair fight if we did that. Okay, so yeah. Because I think what happened was you wanted to do a bunch of John Carpenter movies.
Yes, I wanted to do the Apocalypse trilogy.
The Apocalypse trilogy, correct. And then I thought, okay, since we're doing John Carpenter's The Thing, why don't we do another Two Movies Enter, since that's technically a remake. And yeah, this is gonna be interesting.
When movies get to fighting, it happens here, and it finishes here. Two movies enter, one movie leaves. And right now, I've got two movies. Two movies with a gut full of fear. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
In one corner, we have the oldest movie we've done on the podcast so far. The 50s film that you can see on the TV in John Carpenter's Halloween. The Thing from Another World from 1951. And in the other corner, we have a John Carpenter movie. What do you know? The Thing from 1982. Categories that well, you know what? Fuck it. We'll just
do those as we go along?
Yeah, I don't feel like reading through them right now.
That's fair.
Okay. So, our first category, we have tagline / poster / marketing. I'm gonna put pictures of the posters.
Okay.
The posters for Thing from Another World look like a 50s B movie. I mean...
Yeah. Although I will say, I do actually kind of like that second poster for The Thing from Another World.
Yeah, I like the blood
just
red.
The way that it's a bit more...
The blood red title looks pretty good. The other poster, it's like, you got the characters on it, okay. Almost looks like the Honeymooners or something, I just realized. Like, that could be like Ralph Cramden over there or something. One tagline was, natural or supernatural. And another one was, your blood will turn ice cold. It creeps. It crawls. It strikes without warning. Seems more like a tagline for the John Carpenter one than the... Anyway.
Yeah.
That seems more fitting for that one.
These really do feel like kind of 50s taglines.
And also, another thing that's worth pointing out with both these posters is that Howard Hawks' name is, like, very prominent on both of them.
Yeah, like, and on that first one, it's just about as big as the main title.
The director, though, is, like, nowhere to be seen, and, like, neither are the actors' names, actually, I just realized.
Yeah.
They really want people to know Howard Hawks was involved here. And then there's also some covers which have the actual monster on it. Okay, the 1982... Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention. The trailer. It's pretty boring. It's just, like, over-dramatic narration. You also don't see a lot in the trailer. Like, I know they're trying to keep things mysterious, but, like, barely anything happens. It's just like, okay. The 1982 movie has a pretty mysterious poster. You got this guy in like a parka with light shining out. You can't see the face there.
It's a very striking poster.
I feel like the poster of ATM ripped it off, actually, now that I think about it.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
That movie is fucking horrible.
I think you're right. Looking at this poster.
ATM is like one of the worst horror movies I think I've ever seen, actually. But yeah, but the thing, like, the light's shining out, there's, like, a lot of ice around it. This one's really emphasizing, like, the cold more so than the other one did.
Yeah. Because, like, looking at the poster for that first one, I would not have guessed that it takes place in the Arctic.
Not really, no. It could just be taking place, like... It could even be taking place in space, for all you know, or just, like, somebody's backyard.
Yeah.
Like, it could be anywhere. The tagline for the John Carpenter movie was "The ultimate in alien terror." It's worth pointing out that the thing came out a few years after Alien, so there's that. A lot of people compared it to Alien when it came out. I personally prefer the other tagline, though.
Which other one?
Man is the warmest place to hide.
That one's pretty good.
Which, that's in the trailer, but it's not on the posters. I think I don't know why they didn't use it on the poster. I guess it just confused people. The trailer for it shows the UFO, the snow, and not much. I mean, it's just... Again, it's not a very good trailer. It's hard to tell what's
So both of them just kind of made it mysterious from what it sounds like.
Yeah, like, it's just kind of hard to tell what's happening. And granted, there are some trailers that give too much away. I feel like both these movies, they left things a little too ambiguous. No pun intended.
I think that the 82 one has the better poster, but if I'm being honest, I'm not really a fan of the taglines for either movie.
Oh. The ultimate,
like
the ultimate in alien terror is kind of, that's not the best tagline.
Yeah.
Again, they should have went with "Man is the warmest place to hide."
Yeah, that one would have been better. Or like you mentioned, the one tagline for the 1950s.
Yeah, that one would have fit better. Yeah. I feel like there another poster I do sometimes see for the 1982 one. Well, I think this is the DVD. Yeah, this is the DVD cover. I do occasionally see this one. Hell, this might have been the first one I saw of it, because it was, like, on Netflix once, but it took a long time for me to realize that that's a person's face in there. Because when I first saw that, I didn't know what the hell that was. But again, really emphasizing the cold.
Yeah. I feel like the original movie poster is better than the DVD cover.
Yeah. What about the 1951's DVD cover? I think that one just has, again, like the... Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I've seen this before. There's the DVD cover for the 1951 movie.
Oh. Yeah, that one just has the monster right there, doesn't it?
Yep. The plant man. And they really wanted to say, oh yeah, James Arness as the Thing.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
I think mostly just because of the poster, I'm leaning the 1982.
1982, yeah. Neither of them had very good trailers, so...
Yeah. Neither had great trailers. Neither one really had great taglines, except for the 82's "The Man is the Warmest Place to Hide." That one was pretty good.
Okay, so you were going with the 1921 for that category.
Yep. Let's see. I'll keep track of the
Yeah,
score
keep track of the score. Yeah, I always forget to keep track of the score in these. Okay, box office / profit. This one's a little easier because I mentioned before one of these movies made its money back and the other did not. Now, I couldn't find the budget for a Thing from Another World, although I might have to look again. But it made almost $2 million in the U.S. and Canada, and it was apparently the highest-grossing sci-fi film of that year.
Hang on, is that adjusted for inflation or not?
I assume not.
Oh wow.
I don't know what it is adjusted for inflation, but like it was the highest-grossing sci-fi film of 1951. It even beat The Day the Earth Stood Still, which is impressive. Let me look at. I'm gonna go on IMDb, see if maybe they have the budget there.
And I'm gonna put that into
Yeah, what's
inflation calculator.
Adjusted for inflation was. I'm gonna assume it didn't cost that much. Like at most, it would have cost like what, $1 million? Yeah. I can't imagine it costing much more than that.
So it comes out to about $23 million for the box office. Wow. Okay.
Budget estimated is $1.6 million.
Okay.
So according to IMDb, at least, according to IMDb.
Okay.
John Carpenter's The Thing did not fare as well. It cost $15 million and made $19.9 million in the U.S. So it was a box office bomb.
Yeah.
Part of it might be that it came out in the summer and it's not a summer movie. So that could be it. Not to mention, it had a lot of blockbusters to compete with. Apparently, it came out the same month as E.T., Blade Runner, Poltergeist, and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. So that is some competition.
Yeah, right I can see why it might not have performed very well.
I should also point out Blade Runner was also a bomb as well.
But I mean, E.T.
kind of just destroyed everything at the box office that year. And it was a very costly flop too. Like it led to John Carpenter getting fired off of Firestarter, no pun intended, and losing a picture deal with the studio. Like it wasn't until home video when it started getting more attention. But yeah, the 1951 one, I mean, it basically...
it blew it out of the water.
It actually gets a point here. Wow. That's
so far it's even. Let's see how long it stays that way.
Okay, cast / characters. Now, the cast of Thing from Another World, it's mostly people I don't know. James Arness from Gunsmoke played the Thing. George Fenneman, I didn't realize this recently, but George Fenneman appears in an uncredited role. And he was the announcer on Groucho Marx's game show, You Bet Your Life.
Really? Huh.
And he was also the one that had to, like, add up the, scores and stuff. You know, he was the straight man to Groucho's antics, as well. Voice actor Paul Frees. It's not spelled that way.
No, it's not spelled like Mr. Freeze?
Frees. Oh, imagine if Mr. Freeze was in one of these. That would be... But Paul Frees has an uncredited role. He's one of those voice actors with just a ridiculous number of credits. Like, I wouldn't even know which ones to name off.
Hmm.
Like, it's a long list, but a lot of, like, Rankin Bass productions, from what I was seeing.
Okay.
As for the characters, I mean, they serve their roles, but they're honestly pretty forgettable.
Yeah, they all feel sort of like generic early 1950s man who served in World War II.
Yeah, and like it's like a lot of 50s B movies. They're either scientists or the military.
Yeah, yeah,
And the ones that did stood out, they were just archetypes basically. Like you
yeah,
had the journalist, you had the old scientist, the military leader, the
yeah.
hero, the love interest, it's just okay. And like chemistry, what's that?
Yeah, no, there's like no chemistry between any of the characters. Honestly, it's a little hard to tell apart some of the military characters just because they all sort of blend together.
That's another thing. There were too many characters. A lot of them were
There
like,
were so many.
and a lot of them
And
were
like only a
interchangeable.
few of them, yeah, and only a few of them die as well, so you can't even like keep track of the body count.
Yeah. Oh, and there's also a forced romance too,
Which is kind of weird.
yeah, that was kind of weird. There's like one scene it was kind of like implying a bondage play or something, which I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
that's kind of weird, like because it's like
that's
50s.
a weird joke for 1951.
Yeah, because this was during the Hayes era, so I'm surprised they
Hmm.
were able to get away with that. But yeah, characters not this movie's strength. I gotta say.
And I'm gonna say this just because I don't think this would go into any of the other categories, so might as well mention it here. It is interesting to think about how all of these characters, like, they make a bunch of passing references to being in World War II.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this
Just
was
just having that
1951.
be a thing is just a little weird. Yeah.
It's 1951, so it was like 6 years after the end of World War II.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that is kind of yeah. Yeah, that historical context is kind of interesting. I guess I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of that. The cast of the John Carpenter one, we got Kurt Russell
Yep. Coming back again for the podcast.
because we had him as Snake Plissken in Escape from New York and Escape from L.A.
We had him as the soldier in Soldier.
Yeah, soldier.
I don't remember his name. In that movie.
Just oh shit, what was his name? I
It was
don't
probably
remember.
John something.
What was it? I don't remember his name.
I'm gonna have to look it up. Oh, Sergeant Todd 3465.
Todd, that's what his name was. And he was in Fox and the Hound, which also had a character named Todd, but not played by him. He played Copper. But anyway, we got Wilford Brimley.
Yep.
I'm Wilford Brimley, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
Although what's criminal here is that he doesn't have his famous mustache.
I know, the first time I watched this movie, I didn't even realize that was Wilford Brimley until I saw the credits.
I know. He like plays the same character and everything, just like a
Yeah.
kind of grumpy old man. Keith David, which we had him in
Yep.
Armageddon. And it was so weird watching this because he's so young in this. This must have been like his
Yeah.
first movie or something.
Yeah, it was pretty. It's his second movie.
Wasn't he in like Platoon or something?
Yeah, right after the thing. That's his next credit.
Yeah, I thought so. And They Live. He's in They Live.
Yep.
Isn't he in that like ridiculously long fight scene with the...
Yeah, it's him versus Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I forgot he was in Roadhouse. Wow. It's kind of ridiculous, like, 'cause I feel like there was like a point in time where I would just be watching a movie and I'd be like, wait, Keith David is in this? And then I'd like watch another one, I'd be like, he's in this too? Like, I just had this run of like movies that had Keith David in them. He seems to just pop up in like everything.
I know. Just looking through his filmography, he's in the Chronicles of Riddick. He's in a Final Fantasy movie. He's in Transporter 2.
Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. Richard Dysart, which he's in one of my favorite movies, Being There.
Hmm.
And he's not the only cast member who's in that movie either, because there's another guy from that movie that's in this. The guy that says, "You gotta be fucking kidding me." He was in Being There,
Windows. So. Thomas Waits. No, it wasn't. It wasn't Windows. It was the Stoner, right? Yeah.
This movie would have been really weird if maybe Chauncey Gardner is the thing. I don't know. Donald Moffat, which he played the president in Clear and Present Danger, has a very memorable scene where he has a shouting match with Harrison Ford in that movie.
Also in Gunsmoke.
What did you say?
He's also in Gunsmoke.
Oh, another actor. Oh, yeah, because the thing in the 1951 movie was from Gunsmoke. That's interesting. Adrienne Barbeau did the voice of the computer. We've had her before. She's in another John Carpenter movie, Escape from New York.
Oh.
So the characters in the 1982 movie, it's just a bunch of dudes in coats drinking beer and working in the cold, basically.
That's pretty accurate. Each one has sort of like a core like personality trait. Like you have the one guy who's the stoner. You've got Knowles, who's supposed to be like kind of a sassy cook. You got McCready, who's like a stoic loner. You got Childs, who's a bit of a hothead.
You got Kurt Russell, who's Kurt Russell.
You've got Gary, who feels like he belongs in the 1951 The Thing movie.
Which one was he? Wait a minute.
The one played by Donald Moffat.
Oh, okay. And he was old. He was probably old enough to have been in that, yeah. Yeah, like, all the characters in the movie are pretty unlikable, or not necessarily unlikable, but they don't really feel like your typical, like, heroic characters, you know? Like, not even Kurt Russell. Like, Kurt Russell, he ends up accidentally shooting an innocent man at one point. And, like, Keith David calls him a murderer.
And his solution to everything when none of his other plans work is just to blow everything up.
Just, like, use a flamethrower. Yeah, he, like, goes all, like, Ripley and Aliens on him.
And he, at the beginning, he loses a chess match to a computer, so he just destroys the computer.
Yeah.
Cheating bitch.
They don't feel as much like archetypes, but I'll be honest, a lot of them blend together for me, and the ones that did stand out, they mostly stood out because of the actors playing them. I mean, because let's be real, any character stands out when they're played by Kurt Russell or Wilford Brimley.
Yeah.
I mean... Then again, it does make the movie more suspenseful because you're not sure who is the thing or not. So.
Yeah.
And I thought the acting was good. Everybody just seemed confused and scared, which fit.
You know, that's fair.
I'll give them this. They managed to make Wilford Brimley scary. I mean, that's a feat right there.
Yeah, but that scene where he's like freaking out, threatening to kill everyone on the base just so the alien doesn't get out.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
I've got a question for you about the characters. If the characters were to switch movies, how do you think they would handle the alien threat that they're up against?
I feel like all the ones in the 50s movie would just, like, die.
Pretty quickly.
Because of that negligent scientist that, like, wants to study the thing.
Yeah.
Which I forgot to mention him when we were talking about the character. He was, like, one of the only characters from that movie that kind of stood out to me. But again, it's because he was, like, kind of an archetype, so, you know... But, I don't think characters are like necessarily the strength of either of these movies, but as far as cast goes, the 1982 one is by far the better cast.
100%.
So are we gonna give this the 1982 one?
Yep, another point for The Thing.
Yep. I don't know how I'm writing it. Okay, we're 1982. Okay, so it's 2-1 right now. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, this next one. Oh, this isn't fair either.
Directing.
So, Thing from Another World was directed by Christian Nyby. I think it's how, I don't know how it's pronounced.
Who had also directed parts of Gunsmoke.
Okay. Oh my god, why are there so many Gunsmoke connections? Although, one thing that's worth bringing up, there's some people that debate if Howard Hawks directed this. Because he's uncredited as the director. Like, he was a producer on the movie.
Okay.
And a lot of people pointed out, like, there's a lot of, like, hallmarks of, like, his movies in this. It's kind of a poltergeist situation. Like, you know, like, people debate, did Tobe Hooper direct it or did Spielberg direct it, you know? But Christian Nyby, he was mostly an editor, and this was his most prominent directing credit. I honestly haven't even heard of any of the other movies he directed. Now, Howard Hawks, I could at least name some of his movies, because he did His Girl Friday, Rio Bravo, you know, stuff like that. And the directing of this movie, it's fine. I mean, we're not getting much unique here. Like, it didn't stand out, but it wasn't like...
Yeah, it's competent at the very least.
Then again, this was made in, like, the old studio system. You know, directors didn't have as much control back then. It was more of a producer's game back then. But yeah, it's competent. I mean, it's more competent than a lot of 50s B movies that get shown on Mystery Science Theater. So...
Yeah.
Like, it's not an Ed Wood movie or anything. Although that would have made it more entertaining.
I will say, there is actually, like, one part that sort of stands out to me, and it's when they're first investigating the UFO, and then they accidentally blow it up with the thermite charges.
Okay.
But I think really, other than that, not much sticks out about the movie.
The ending, I guess. The ending, but we could talk about that a little more later. The Thing was directed by John Carpenter.
Do we need to say anything more?
I mean, yeah, we've heard of him, right? We've had him, 3 times before on the podcast? Escape from New York, Escape from LA, Halloween.
Yeah.
And I know this is you said once this is your favorite John Carpenter movie.
Yeah, I still think it is.
Okay. It's definitely a good choice. Definitely.
Yeah. It is very well shot.
And this movie does a really good job of, like, showcasing his strengths. Like, this feels very much like a John Carpenter movie. It's very atmospheric and dark. It's probably his most nihilistic movie. Like, it's...
Which is saying something.
Because it's a really dour ending.
Yeah.
And, like, even during, like, scenes where not much is happening, there's still, like, a lot of tension to it, you know.
And just the overall, like, atmosphere of the movie is just incredible, I think. The whole thing, it feels, like, lonely, and like you said, there's, like, an obvious sense of tension in the air.
It does a good job, like, taking advantage of, like, the location and, like, the isolation of the characters, you know. I mean, it's John Carpenter. What else do I need to say? I mean, like, do we need to debate this one? Like...
Yeah, no, this one's pretty obvious. We're giving another point to The Thing.
Good job, John Carpenter. He got a point. Critical reception. This is an interesting one.
Yes.
Kind of a hard one because Okay, are we taking into account the reception at the time or their reception now?
I think it's reception at the time. But we probably should talk about how opinions on at least the 1982 one has changed.
Yeah, because if we're talking at the time, the winner is a lot easier to determine.
Yes.
Then again, if we're talking now, it's also easy to determine. So, Thing from Another World, for a long time, was considered one of the best sci-fi films of the 50s. Not so much nowadays. I mean, you look at like it's overshadowed by stuff, rightfully, by stuff like The Day the Earth Stood Still, Byron Haskins' War of the Worlds, Forbidden Planet, stuff like that. I don't know if this will factor into the points, but one fact I thought that was worth bringing up is that sci-fi author Isaac Asimov thought The Thing from Another World was one of the worst movies he'd ever seen.
Really?
Yeah, granted, I don't know what he considers the best movie he'd ever seen, but I thought that fact was kind of funny, Because, I mean, Isaac Asimov, he knows quite a bit about sci-fi. He wrote a lot of sci-fi.
He wrote, like, some of the big foundational books of sci-fi.
Yeah. I think he's, like, one of the most prolific writers of all time, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Amazingly enough, the most prolific writer of all time is, at least according to Guinness World Records, L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah.
Although granted, a lot of his books probably weren't actually written by him. But The Thing from Another World was a very influential movie. John Carpenter himself cited it as an influence. I mean, if you watch John Carpenter's Halloween, the movie they're watching on TV, it's Thing from Another World.
Yeah.
Ridley Scott was influenced by it, which you can kind of tell if you watch Alien.
Yeah.
John Frankenheimer, Toby Hooper, So it was a pretty well-regarded movie for a very long time. John Carpenter's The Thing, at least at the time it was released, got thrashed by critics.
It got horrible reception.
There was even like an article or something that said like, is this the most hated movie of all time? Like, that's how viciously it was attacked. I've never fully understood why people hated it so much at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, even the director of Thing from Another World and one of the actors went after it. I could actually pull up the quote if you want. Or no, it was it was the director, Christian Ivey. He said about John Carpenter's The Thing, if you want blood, go to the slaughterhouse. All in all, it's a terrific commercial for scotch.
Wow, okay.
And then the actor, Kenneth Tobey, who was in The Thing from Another World, he criticized the visual effects. He said they were so explicit they actually destroyed how you were supposed to feel about the characters. They became almost a movie in themselves and were a little too horrifying.
What a weird criticism.
Yeah, I know. But basically, like, the Thing, it was a box office flop. It got a lot of critics went after it. It basically ruined John Carpenter's Hollywood career for years. I'm not fully sure why. Because actually, it sounds like John Carpenter was really proud of the movie, too. Like,
yeah.
He said it was, like, his favorite of his own movies.
But thankfully, the reception to it has changed with time.
Yeah. I do have a few One of the few critics that did like it, much to my shock, was Gene Siskel, which...
Oh, wow.
Because he usually hated horror movies, but apparently he liked this one. And even without looking, I could probably figure out what Leonard Maltin thought. I mean, and you probably can too. Like, you want to guess what?
I'm gonna guess he hated it.
Or sorry, this for both of them. I should have made that a little more clear.
Oh yeah. So
because I found his reviews for both these movies.
Okay.
Remember what we know about Leonard Maltin.
So I'm gonna say, this is my guess. My guess is that he gave The Thing from Another World 3 stars, and he gave The Thing 1.5.
Okay, you got one of them right. He gave Thing from Another World 3.5 stars out of 4.
Really?
He thought the direction was tense, and the performances were excellent. He also praised the score, which we'll talk about that a little more in the next category. He gave the John Carpenter movie 1.5 stars out of 4. He praised it for being more faithful to the original story, but criticized it for being too gory. Of course he did.
Yeah.
A reminder, this is the same rating he gave Blade Runner and First Blood.
Of course.
And lower than what he gave
Good old Batman Forever.
Also, he apparently gave, this is also shocking, he gave the Thing prequel a higher rating.
Really?
He gave that one 2 out of 4 stars. Although he thought that the special effects were better in the John Carpenter one, so there's that at least.
Yeah, I guess.
So there you go. There's another reason for you to hate Leonard Maltin. So if you want to compare and contrast, Thing from Another World has a 7.1 on IMDb. John Carpenter's The Thing has an 8.2. Which, again, these reflect modern numbers rather than the numbers when they originally came out. Thing from Another World has an 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. The Thing has 84%.
Huh.
Although it trounces Thing from Another World if you look at the audience rating, where it's...
Yeah, I'd imagine.
73% versus 92%. On Letterboxd, The Thing has a 4.4 out of 5. And Thing from Another World has a 3.4 out of 5. So again, if we're going by how they were received at the time, like when they came out, the 1951 one wins, but if we're going by how they're received now, the John Carpenter one wins. So that's what this category depends on, basically.
Mm. I feel like just the critical reception, just like probably go based off of what it was at the time when it was released. Time.
You want to go at the time? Okay, so the 1950...
Yeah, because I feel like that's also what we've done with like the previous versus movies that we've done has been.
I think so, yeah. We do factor in a few other things, but yeah, I think so. I think it was a little bit more of like a balance, but yeah, I think it at the time would be... Okay, so the winner is of this category is the 1951 one. So now isn't it tied again?
Close. It's 2-3.
With the 82 one in the lead.
Yep.
Okay. So the music. Thing from Another World has a score by Dmitri Tiomkin, which I might be mispronouncing that. And he did a lot of music scores. A lot of them for westerns, including Red River and High Noon. Those are some names. Also a lot of Frank Capra movies, including It's a Wonderful Life.
Huh.
And he's yet another person involved with this movie that appeared on Groucho Marx's game show You Bet Your Life.
I gotta check real quick and see. Nah, okay, it doesn't look like he did anything for Gunsmoke.
Okay. The music, it's fine. I mean, it sounds like
Yeah.
music from a 1950s UFO movie.
It's used pretty sparingly. Most of the movie doesn't have any music over it.
But I mean, it fits. It adds a
Yeah.
little tension. And this is also when movie scores were using this instrument called a theremin. I don't know if you...
Yeah. I love theremin so much.
It was this electronic instrument that you played without actually touching it. A lot of 50s like sci-fi movies used it because it added this kind of eerie, like, sort of alien... It's kind of sounds like an alien radio transmission or something. You know, if you hear it, you know what I'm talking about. By the
Soviet Union.
Yeah, it was like invented by a Russian dude, if I remember right.
Yeah.
I like learned about it in like a college music class, so it's kind of, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I don't know if this was like one of the first movies to use that, but it might have been.
Real quick, about the theremin. Well, one other thing to add, real quick. So it was made by a Russian man named Leon Theremin. Well, apparently he also invented a listening device to spy on U.S. ambassadors, which he named The Thing.
Oh, I see why you brought that up now.
Yeah.
At first I thought I might have to cut this, but then you said that, I'm like, oh yeah. And let me guess, he was also cousins twice removed with Kurt Russell or something.
He was on Gunsmoke.
He was on Gunsmoke. Of course he was. Everybody was on Gunsmoke. I was on Gunsmoke, and that show was around, like, decades before I was born. Okay, so John Carpenter's The Thing has a score by Ennio Morricone. I mean, that... Do we even need to, like, say who that is?
Yeah. That's a huge person to get to do the score for your movie.
And it's especially interesting because John Carpenter usually did his own music scores.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you're going to get somebody else, Ennio Morricone, I mean, that guy's, like, done hundreds of movies.
But what I find really interesting is that it kind of sounds like a John Carpenter score.
It does. I think there were a few... I think John Carpenter did go back in and add a few things to it, but I don't know how much, but yeah. And it's also interesting because Ennio Morricone didn't usually do electronic scores.
Yeah.
Which is why it sounds like a John Carpenter score, because John Carpenter did electronic scores usually. Unbelievably, this is technically not the first time Ennio Morricone has been on the podcast.
I'm trying to remember the other time.
Because Turkish Star Wars.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Like, they stole one of his music tracks. I think it was from Moses the Lawgiver.
Of course.
It was like a mini-series that starred Burt Lancaster as Moses. Oh my goodness.
I think another fun fact about the score in this movie, there was 3 tracks that went unused that were later used in The Hateful Eight.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so this movie technically, the score for this technically won an Oscar.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's a very ominous, like, electronic score. It fits the movie very well.
Yes.
I think. It's again a part of why the movie has such a atmosphere, you know, to it. And it sounds like a John Carpenter score, even though it's not. This movie also has a Stevie Wonder song, so I think that should earn it some extra points.
They play Superstitious at one point.
Superstition, yeah. But I think the 1982 one wins, because I just find it a more memorable score. And I find it creepier as well. Do you disagree, or
it's definitely the 82 score for me. It's so much more memorable. I've actually listened to it a number of times, just like at work or whenever I'm like doing something else. I'll just have it playing.
Yeah. I mean, the 1951 one, yeah, it has a good music score, but it's just not.
It doesn't really stand out.
It doesn't stand out. Yeah, I don't really. Aside from like the beginning, like the opening, I usually don't remember much of the music from that movie. But yeah, so the 1982 one is
the winner again.
I have a feeling this is gonna be a running trend. Because now,
boy, the next category
definitely is with this next one. The visual effects, okay, but let's be a little balanced here. Okay, so Thing from Another World. Okay, it's a '50s movie for one, so obviously it's gonna not hold up as well as effects from the '80s. It was obviously shot on a soundstage. And this was back when, like, you would use, like, asbestos as the snow in movies sometimes. Or, like, sliced up potatoes. It's a pretty decent set, though. I mean, it does look like they're out in the snow, at the very least. Granted, it's a black and white movie, so maybe that.
Yeah, it can kind of help cover up some,
I think the costume for the Thing looks okay. Granted, it's kind of off in the distance a lot of the time.
That's I think something that we'll talk about a little bit more in a later category. But
yeah, and it looks like a tall plant man. I mean, you ever see Swamp Thing? He looks sort of like that. There was one effect though that actually impressed me. It was the lightning effects at the end.
That was actually pretty good, especially for like the time.
That like actually looked pretty good for a '50s movie. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, an early '50s movie.
But there's not a lot of special effects in the movie. They were used pretty sparingly.
Because there was like the dynamite explosion or the thermite explosion when they're at the UFO. It was a pretty good explosion.
The effect on the title card, I guess, if we're gonna include that as a special effect, that looked cool. And the UFO, I guess, looked fine. Yeah. John Carpenter's The Thing. This movie definitely had a lot of special effects.
It completely blows the 1951 one out of the water.
This one again, it's almost. This one's, like, not even fair. I mean...
No. Because aside from the fact that there's, like, 30 years of special effects, including Star Wars, which came out, like, the decade before.
If this came out before Star Wars, it might have been a little bit more fair, but yeah, it's...
Yeah. They're all practical in this movie, and they just look... equal parts horrific and impressive.
And it looks so disgusting too.
Yeah,
like
it's so just like there's so much viscera.
When I think of this movie, I just think of all the gross like forms that the creature takes like in the movie. Like they really sell that this thing has no set form. It just changes depending on the surroundings, you know. And some of it still looks pretty impressive for today, like the effects on like the dog and like the...
I was about to say the dog thing just looks like fantastic.
when the guy's chest like opens up with the teeth.
Opens up, yeah.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of ones we could go through just with The Thing. I mean, that's just talking about The Thing, you know, because also, you know, the spaceship at the beginning looks pretty good. And the sound effects too, like the movie has pretty good sound as well. I noticed it has
the sound design is just phenomenal. There's one sound effect that still sticks with me. It's when what was his name? It was like the red-haired guy when he gets taken over by the Thing and he's outside in the snow and everyone's around and he does like that scream.
Oh, you know, his hands are like kind of messed up.
Like,
that's another thing worth
after
bringing up. Rob Bottin did the effects on this. He did the effects on RoboCop. And some of the effects in this kind of reminded me of when the guy melts in RoboCop.
That's actually true, yeah.
It just looks so disgusting, like just oh my god. Like you can kind of tell it's human, but also not. You know, that's kind of just what really what this movie is. It's just like it's imitating like humans, like it, but then it when it like reveals itself, it's like oh my goodness. I think another thing that also helped is they filmed this on location, so it gives it a more realistic vibe. This must have been such a pain in the ass to film out in like all that snow and shit. I mean, oh my god, like no wonder they're drinking so much scotch.
I mean, to be fair, there's not much else to really do in Antarctica.
Play chess with computers, I guess.
And then destroy the computer when you lose.
If they had a TV, maybe they could watch John Carpenter's The Thing. How do we have a copy of John Carpenter's The Thing? We're still in the middle of making it. And we could talk about the effects a little bit more when we get to a later category, but I think this one's easy. It's the 1982 one.
Yeah, no, it goes to
this one.
Thing.
Like, this category
no
just
contest.
was not. This category was not fair at all. I mean, there were way more special effects in this movie, and it took way more like use of those effects than in the 51 movie. It's a much more effects driven movie than I think the 50s one. It was a lot more like plot and character driven than effects driven, you know, whereas with the 82 one, people remember the special effects more than they do the characters, you know. And speaking of which, the story. The Thing from Another World has honestly a pretty generic plot. I mean, at this point, research station in the snow has an alien that was frozen. It thaws out and starts killing because it's not Captain America. I will cut it a little bit of slack, though, because it was very early in the 50s. A lot of movies had done the monster going around killing people thing, but not many movies had done the alien invasion plot yet.
So it was just sort of leading into that
because this was 1951, we should point out. Man from Planet X came out the same year, but I can't really think of any that came before this. I mean, there was the H.G. Wells book War of the Worlds, but that didn't get adapted until 1953. That being said, this takes forever to get going.
It's an hour and a half, but it feels so much longer just because you're waiting for the Thing to come out.
There's not much interesting that happens until the end.
Yeah.
And then the ending itself was kind of anticlimactic. It felt like they defeated the Thing way too easily.
Yeah, it feels like whenever the Thing shows up, it gets its ass kicked.
I know, yeah.
Because it comes out of the ice and it loses its arm, like, right away. It breaks through a door and gets set on fire and runs away, and then it's bug zapped. into oblivion.
It's just another thing of like, I think just other movies, they came and took this concept and did it better later, so this movie just doesn't. Again, at the time, it was probably really novel seeing this and going like, oh my god, an alien is going around killing. But whereas now, it's like, everybody's fucking done that. I mean, nothing new under the sun with that one. And we mentioned earlier, the characters, they're not exactly the most interesting.
No, a lot of them sort of blend together. And then I guess this would go into like a later category, but it feels like no one's really taken this thing very seriously, except for like the scientist who wants to study from it. Everyone else is just sitting back and cracking jokes about it.
Yeah, it's a lot of jokey dialogue. Yeah, it's also it's a lot more of a sci-fi movie than the 80s one is.
Yeah.
I think the 80s one just is more of a straight-up horror movie than the 50s one. Because, I mean, think from another world, yeah, it is horror, but it's also sci-fi. I mean, again, it's an alien, so, like, you know, and it doesn't play up the horror elements as much as the 80s one, but... So, the John Carpenter one, one advantage it has, no shoehorned romantic subplot.
Yeah, that's true.
And there was much rejoicing.
Yay.
Again, it's kind of your typical trapped in an isolated place, a monster picks people off type thing, but what sets this one apart is the thing.
Yeah.
It's a shapeshifter, which is a pretty terrifying concept that I'm surprised isn't utilized in more movies.
It adds a lot of paranoia to it, just knowing that any of the characters that are on screen at any given moment could be the thing.
Yeah, there's just a lot more suspense and, like, a lot more things are, like, left up to interpretation than in the 50s one. It's a lot scarier, too.
Yeah.
They took a concept that on its face is kinda just cookie cutter, but then they added something novel into the mix to, like, change it up, you know? I forgot that this movie had several title drops. Most done by Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
I also forgot how dour the ending of this thing was.
It is incredibly, because I think the ending is fantastic. It's very dour, but it's also very paranoid because you're trying to like figure out if Childs is a thing.
And again, it leaves a lot of things up for interpretation. You know, they're just sitting there in the snow,
watching the base burn.
They basically freeze to death. I mean, nobody's coming to get them. I mean, they crack open a beer and like, and we're not even sure if they fully destroyed the thing or not. You know, again, it's like kind of open-ended what happens afterwards. Yeah. So,
and so, what do you think? Do you think Childs was a thing at the end of the movie?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think so, and again, it doesn't really matter because they're both gonna die. The only thing that changes is the thing, like, I guess the thing might escape, but I mean, they're both just sitting out there in the snow. They're probably both gonna die. So. Yeah, I don't know, actually. Because it kind of seems like Kurt Russell just destroyed the rest of them, and that they're the only two left alive. But again, I do like that they don't explicitly say, you know, hell, maybe
because it feels like Childs could have been turned by Blair.
He might have. Again, it's
So there's always that chance.
like mentioning Blade Runner again. It's kind of like Blade Runner, where it's like maybe he's a replicant, maybe he isn't. They don't say it exactly, but they don't not say it either. So
Yeah.
anyway, but yeah, I'm going with the 1982 one. I mean,
yeah, exactly. It's
a lot more. It's just a lot more interesting of a story here. I think
a lot more creative.
You know, they added a few more things to make it a little more, and I think it's just a much more. When people think of The Thing, that's the story they're thinking of. I think that's the that's the one that like held up over the years, that stayed in the public consciousness. Dialogue is the next category, and
okay,
I'm gonna be honest, it's not the strong point of either of these movies.
Yeah. I will say I will give a defense for the 1982 movie, because I feel like the dialogue fits very well for the situation that it's in. Everyone's sort of paranoid. You can tell nobody really trusts each other, both from the dialogue and from just the physical acting itself.
Mainly from the acting, I would argue, but yeah.
But whereas in the 1950s movie, like I kind of mentioned before, the tone almost feels off with it, where most of the guys are just cracking jokes about the whole situation.
The 50s one, a lot of it is like your typical, like you watch a Howard Hawks movie, this is what dialogue in a Howard Hawks movie is like. It's very fast-paced. Some of it overlaps, like kind of like a Robert Altman movie. It's like, banter. That's what this movie is, just banter. There's also too much dialogue, I thought. It's a lot of telling rather than showing. Like, it's exposition, technobabble. Everybody kind of talks the same, too, so that might be part of why the characters are a little interchangeable. And of course, whenever the one female character shows up, there's flirting, because of course, 50s. And then the lines I did write down, a lot of them were they were either cliche or kind of weird, like, no one tells me anything around here, or there's some phrase which I don't know if it's just some outdated slang or something, like holy cats. They say that a lot in that movie.
Yeah, I don't think
Or making like an octopus. Okay. They also use the archaic version of boner in this movie, which I think is kind of funny. Because if anybody that doesn't know, boner used to mean like the same thing as like screwing up. That's kind of the way people used to use it. Whereas now, it does not mean that.
It has a very different meaning nowadays.
I also forgot that this is the movie where the phrase "watch the skies" came from.
Yeah, because that's part of like the ending monologue, right?
That's kind of a big deal. That's a really popular phrase. Especially if you watch X-Files.
Oh, yeah.
Because I kind of forgot. I forgot it was from this movie in particular, but maybe I shouldn't be that surprised, because UFOs, anyway.
I bring you a warning. Every one of you listening to my voice, tell the world. Tell this to everybody wherever they are. Watch the skies everywhere. Keep looking. Keep watching the skies.
But yeah, it's 50s dialogue, basically. When people think of, like, if people are, like, making fun of, like, 50s dialogue, I mean, this is what they're thinking of. As for John Carpenter's The Thing, I don't remember that many lines from it, and the only ones I do, they all have the F-bomb in them.
They are some pretty good lines, though.
There's like Kurt Russell shouting at The Thing.
Yeah, fuck you too!
I like when they finally clear Gary of being the Thing, and he's like,
I know you gentlemen have been through a lot. And when you find the time, I'd rather not spend the rest of this winter tied to this fucking couch!
Yeah, that was a good one. That was one of the few funny lines of the movie, too. Like, a movie this dour needed a little bit of levity, and that was, like, one of the few in there. Or when the Thing, like, turns into that spider-looking thing.
yeah, the spider head.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Yeah, those are the only lines I remember from that movie. Are those three? Because again, I don't think dialogue is the strength of either of these movies. But granted, the 80s thing uses the dialogue more sparingly. It's a lot more about like building up the tension and stuff. So you got one movie. You got one movie which overuses dialogue, and one movie that underuses it.
There is actually one other line in the 82 movie that I liked. It's when Childs is like asking if anyone actually believes that it's some kind of alien, and the stoner goes, "Chariots of the gods, man. They practically own South America."
Okay.
Because the Chariots of the Gods is like the big, like, it was the book that started the whole ancient aliens thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can tell this movie came out a long time ago.
Yeah.
Both of these movies did at this point. Like, so I guess it depends what you want. Do you want spare dialogue, or do you want your movie to feel like a 50s radio drama? Because that's kind of what the 50s movie feels like, is a radio drama or something, with how much dialogue there is. You probably could you could just take the audio, you probably could just adapt it exactly.
You probably could.
To, like, the audio drama format.
I think I would say the one from the 82 movie is still the better one. Oh, hold on, I might lose power in a second.
Oh no.
Okay, I think we're fine.
Before I rewatched them, I did remember a few lines from the 80s thing, so I guess there's that. Like, I always remember, yeah, fuck you too. Or, yeah. But yeah, so we're gonna go with the 80s one. Oh my goodness. Is it even, like, have we gotten enough points to already declare a winner?
I think we have.
Oh no. I'm afraid to ask what has... Okay.
So at this point, the score will be 2-7.
2-7. Oh, we're not quite over the hump, though.
Oh yeah, we just need one more category to set it over.
Okay, pacing/editing is the next category. And both of these movies are pretty slowly paced, which is surprising.
Especially towards the beginning.
The 50s one is slow, like, it takes a while to get going, not a lot is happening, but the problem is it kind of didn't feel deliberate.
Yeah.
For a movie that's 87 minutes long. It was very short, but it, like you mentioned earlier, it felt longer than that. Like, I remember just sitting there watching it, just be like, can something happen, please?
I remember I was watching it and I was like, it has to almost be over, and I checked and there was 20 minutes left. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Okay. But granted, there's other 50s movies that are kind of like this. There was another movie also about aliens, Invaders from Mars. It also was pretty slowly paced. Like, literally nothing happens in it until, like, the last, like, 20 minutes. Although what happens there is a little bit more interesting than this. And it has better visuals. in this movie. But yeah, but both of those, again, it's... I get that some movies from back then are a little slower paced, but I can bear with that if, like, the acting and the characters and the story are better, but, you know, it's just... Anyway. There were also some editing flubs that I noticed, speaking of the editing. Like, there were, like, a few jumps that I don't think were supposed to be there. It was weird. So, yeah, I'll throw that out there as well. Do you have anything else to say about the 50s?
Not really about the 50s one. Again, everything feels just sort of static in that movie.
Static, that's a good...
Few...
There's a good word to use, yeah, for this, static, yeah.
Because it feels like you'll get multiple scenes that are in the same location that have just the same shot composition to them, where it looks like they might have even just recorded them back to back on the same day.
Yeah. John Carpenter's The Thing. It's also paced pretty slow, but unlike the 51 one, it feels deliberate.
Yes. And as you get closer to the end, it does start to ramp up quite a bit.
Oh my goodness, yeah, definitely. I think more horror movies should look at this one and see how it uses build-up. Because the stuff with the dog at the beginning still creeps me out. Even before
especially when the Norwegians...
Yeah. Even before anything happens, you can tell that there's something wrong with the dog, and it's so scary.
and just the Norwegian hopping out and just, like, shouting and no one's able to understand him.
Yeah. There's just a lot of stuff like
it's...
before that where it's just, like, building up the suspense and you're going, oh my god. Like, going into this thing not knowing anything beforehand must be crazy, because there's parts of this that are still pretty shocking even now, like, watching it again.
Especially, like, the stuff in the dog kennel. I feel like it just, like...
We'll probably talk about it a little bit more later, but yeah. It just flows really well, too. I didn't really notice any editing problems with it. Certainly not with the sound. The sound was pretty good, like I mentioned earlier. Like, the sound effects, and also the music, you know. Like, everything meshes pretty well, I think. And it's just, again, it's like a slow burn, but, like, once things start happening, it's just like, you know, oh my god, like, when's it gonna... what's gonna happen next? You know, it's just... It uses its pacing very, very well, which it was a lot more careful with its pacing, whereas I don't think the 50s one quite got that. So this one's pretty obvious which one I'm voting for.
It also goes to the 1982 thing.
Yeah, John Carpenter gets another point, which at this point I think that means that it's impossible.
The 82 one officially wins.
But we're gonna go through the rest of these anyway.
Yeah.
Camera work. Thing from Another World has okay camera work. I mean, it's fine, but it's just not... It's not very showy, I guess. Like, one thing I noticed is there's not a lot of close-ups.
Yeah.
It stays pretty far back from the characters for the most part, which is probably because they have to show everyone on screen at once, so, you know. And I mean, everyone's in frame, you know, like, it's in focus, so...
Yeah, no, it's competent, but not, like, too exciting. Like I mentioned earlier, it's all sort of static.
Yeah, static, yeah. There are a few memorable shots, mostly of the Thing, or, like, when they're out in the snow at the beginning.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I think when they get out to the UFO, I think that part's pretty visually interesting.
Or, yeah, when they find the flying saucer, yeah, there's some good stuff there. John Carpenter's The Thing looks like a John Carpenter movie, so in other words, it looks great.
Yes.
The cinematography was done by Dean Cundy, who he's done a lot of John Carpenter movies, including Halloween and Escape from New York, 2 other movies that look great. And even before rewatching this, like, I remembered a lot of shots from this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly of the Thing, you know.
Yeah.
And it does a good job, like, capturing the isolation and the atmosphere. And also the coldness, too. Like, watching this, even though it was, like, during the summer, I still felt kind of cold watching this. Like,
this is... It's usually this movie and The Hateful Eight all I rewatch during winter after we've had, like, a huge blizzard. Just because they're, like, perfect snow movies.
they are, yeah. Or The Shining. The Shining.
Oh, yeah.
It's watching that, like, while it's, like, really snowy. That's, like, the perfect time to watch that movie. Yeah, it does such a good job, like, capturing the atmosphere to the point where I can almost smell and taste the beer that they're drinking. Yeah, if you get what I...
And I think the use of light throughout the movie is also pretty good.
The lighting's really good, yeah. Like,
yes.
where, like, the Thing is, like, in the dark a lot of the time, and, like, only occasionally comes out into the light, or, like, or just to, like, make the characters just look, like, just at night a lot.
There's also, like, the scene where the power gets cut, sort of slowly.
It's, like, during a blizzard or something, right?
Yeah.
And it, like, feels like they're just stuck in this one location and they can't go anywhere, you know? Sorry, what were you saying?
I was about to say, like, the scene where the power goes out in the lab and you see the light slowly fade out. Or the scene where you see the dog go into somebody's room and then, like, you can just see their shadow turning, so you don't know if this person's been infected or not at this point.
There's just more about this one that sticks in my mind, you know, when it comes to, like, how it looks and how it's shot.
So is that another point for...
Yeah, and it's just creepier, too.
Yeah.
It accomplishes its goal more, so yeah, the 1982 one. I think... I don't think it's gonna get better for the 1951 one going here on out. Because next we have The Thing. So the Thing from Another World is a plant monster. Or sorry, it's an alien. It's a plant, like, alien. It looks kind of like Frankenstein's monster.
It really does, especially with, like, the forehead.
Mm-hmm. It's a really big forehead.
And, like, some of the ideas that they have is kind of cool, like how they find, like, the seed pods that it planted, or the fact that the arm's still able to work even after it got bit off.
And it, like, reproduces asexually. And
and it needs, like, blood to grow.
Feeds on blood. Yeah, that was interesting. There was one silly part when this, like, scientist listened to some plants.
Oh, yeah, he puts the stethoscope on the seed pod, and he's like, it sounds like a newborn crying for food. That part was a little weird.
Yeah, the plants don't make noise. It makes you wonder, like, what this movie would have been like if it was the plant from Little Shop of Horrors. Because that one also fed on blood, too. So the problem is, okay, so aside from not being the greatest concept, the Thing barely appears in this.
Yeah, it's only in, like, a handful of scenes, and like I said earlier, whenever it's usually getting its ass kicked whenever it shows up.
Yeah, like, it does kill a few dogs. Like, that was kind of creepy. Or, I think how many... Isn't the body count, like, only, like, 2 people?
Yeah.
I think it only kills, like, 2 people. I'm just, okay. One thing I will say though, there is some very good stunt work at the
Yeah.
end where the thing gets lit on fire and it was done for real.
Wow.
Like for the 50s, that's pretty impressive right there.
Yeah.
You know. I mean that poor stunt man. I feel bad for him. But yeah, it's like, I mean, okay, it's kind of just your standard 50s monster. The only really incredibly novel thing about it is that it's an alien. That's really, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, even in the design, again, it just looks like Frankenstein. So.
Yeah, it's really sort of an unoriginal design. It's got like a few sort of like claw hands that are kind of leafy, but other than that, you wouldn't guess that it's supposed to be a plant, dude.
I mean, it's not a terrible costume, but it's just,
It feels uninspired.
Yeah, it's just not the most creative design. Now, speaking of creative designs, the 1982 movie, oh my god, they overdid it here. Cause
It's so insanely impressive.
it's the shape-shifting alien that like blends in, and then when it occasionally turns into this grotesque, almost
thing.
like Lovecraftian design.
Yeah.
And it has different designs like throughout the movie. Like, you know, sometimes it's a spider-looking thing, sometimes it has all these like teeth and stuff. It's just, oh my goodness, like it kind of looks like a Shoggoth at some points.
Yeah.
It's like, it's maybe the most disturbing movie monster ever created. I mean,
Yeah, it's just like every time it appears, it's grotesque, but in a new way. Like you have the dog thing, which you see it's like skin splitting open and all these like tentacles coming out of it. You've got I think it's the Norris thing, where it's like the head comes out on a really long neck and then grows like spider legs.
or there's like the teeth in the guy's chest. Did you mention that?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, Jesus. That one always gets me, like, when that happens.
And the Blair thing at the end of the movie, how it's like, it almost looks like a combination of like the previous things altogether.
It's just, yeah. Like, I think it's scarier than the Xenomorph, personally, because, like,
Yeah.
any one of these characters could be the thing. That's another thing we should point out. So, like, as a result, like, nobody trusts each other. They can't exactly team up and kill it like you would expect. They're kind of just off doing their own thing, just hoping, or I hope the person next to me isn't that thing, you know? And it takes full use of this concept, too, which is crazy. Or maybe that's why it was always disappointing to me.
Is that they just sort of stuck with like a clown design and it never really got crazy beyond that.
Because that's another one where it could like change into anything. Like you have this concept where you can do anything, but then they just don't do that much with it anyway. Not only could this thing be anyone, it could be anywhere. It's just, oh my god.
Yeah.
So as a result, there's just way more possibilities with it. There's way more suspense. It's just way scarier. The design is better. The effects are better. The 1982 one wins, basically.
Yeah, it's no contest.
Yeah, sorry, Carrot Alien. Overall enjoyment. Do we even need to say?
Yeah, no, it's the 82 thing movie. It's not even close for me. So, I'm actually going to start by talking a bit about the 1951 movie. Yeah, so I went in because I've actually seen this movie once before, but it was a while ago. I was in like high school, and I remember being mostly just bored by it. And so, coming back to it now, however many years later, and I'm like, okay, my tastes have changed. I hope they've refined a little bit. And I watched it, and I got more out of it this time than I did my first time, but it was still just incredibly slow. We didn't really get enough of the thing. And I was still mostly just bored by it. Whereas the 1982 one, like every time I watch it, I'm like sucked into it, it feels like. Because everything from like the atmosphere to, even though, we criticized a bit of the dialogue from this movie, like the way the characters act, the way they talk to each other, the effects, just all of it comes together just perfectly in the 1982 movie.
And you did say it is your favorite John Carpenter movie, which says
Yes.
a lot because he's done a lot of good movies. Was there anything else you wanted to?
That was just my quick thoughts on that.
I have quite a bit to say about this one. But yeah, I mean, I think John Carpenter made the better movie here. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Now, I've mentioned before on this podcast, I find it hard to judge horror movies based on how scary they are. And the reason why is because I saw this one so early, and it set really high expectations for me with horror movies. And I don't think many have been able to clear that bar, because usually what happens when I watch a really well-regarded horror movie, I'd be disappointed because it wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. Even if it's one I really like Psycho, The Shining, Nightmare on Elm Street. I love all those movies.
Yeah.
But they didn't terrify me. Like, they have creepy parts, obviously, but they didn't, terrify me. The first time I saw John Carpenter's The Thing, it scared the hell out of me. Like, I literally had a nightmare that night because of it. That's how scary it was for me. Mostly because of the defibrillator scene.
Yeah, no, that one, the first time I watched it, that gave me like a heart attack watching that.
Yeah, that scene fucked me up because you don't see it coming.
No.
You don't see it coming. It's just so, and it's so gross too. Like, just, oh my god. And the poor dogs too. Like, all the stuff with the dogs in this movie still makes me really uncomfortable too. Maybe part of it is because I love animals, but also just like what happens to them is just so, just scary. I mean, and gross too. Because not only is it gross, but there's the surprise factor to it. Like you don't know which one of them is going to turn into the thing, and not only that, you don't know what it's going to turn into next, like what weird design it's going to look like. It's such a terrifying concept. I mean,
and it all happens so suddenly too, like especially with the the chest thing. It happens like within seconds. It just pops up, and it's.
I mean, if it isn't the scariest movie ever made, I honestly don't know what is.
Yeah.
I think the only other horror movie that shocked me as much on first watch was the Dario Argento movie Suspiria. And I think what helped with both these movies is I went in totally blind. I didn't know what was going to happen in either of these movies. Whereas with Psycho, I knew what all the twists were before I watched it, so it wasn't as shocking. Yeah. Same with The Shining, some of those other ones. Whereas with this one, I didn't know what was going to happen in it, and I was like, oh my god. Although, obviously, it's not quite as scary on rewatches. Granted, it probably doesn't help this movie's set in the cold. I watched this during the hot-ass summer this time, so... Although, even watching it again, I kind of forgot about that because of the air conditioning, and I guess this movie just kind of put me in the zone while watching it. John Carpenter movies kind of just do that, where you just feel like he does a good job capturing the atmosphere of the movie. So I was just kind of in the zone, kind of like Stalker, actually.
Yeah, actually.
the getting back to what I was saying. So the 1982, the thing, it's one of the best horror movies ever made. Like, it's one of John Carpenter's best movies. On rewatches, it obviously doesn't quite have the same impact as I know what's going to happen. But even on rewatches, there's still parts that get to me. Again, like I mentioned, the defibrillator scene and the stuff with the dogs. I do think I prefer Escape from New York and Halloween over this as far as John Carpenter movies, but this is definitely up there as one of his best. I mean,
and that's fair.
I find the characters in those a little more memorable, and they're also a little more fun to watch than this one. This one's pretty nihilistic, so
yeah, it is. It's a very bleak movie.
Yeah, I guess I'm more of an optimist than you are, so maybe that's it. I don't know. I will say though, if we had done the awards show after this, I think the thing might have beaten the Xenomorph in the best monster category.
Yeah,
it's a pretty impressive.
So too.
It's a pretty impressive monster, and just the whole concept of it.
Yeah.
The Thing from Another World, I hate to say it, but I honestly find it boring.
Yeah.
I don't like the characters. I don't think the writing is the strongest. The monster barely appears. I mean, I just watch it and I'm just thinking, I can see why Howard Hawks didn't do much sci-fi. So it's just kind of bland, honestly. Like, it's not a poorly made movie. It's just not a very interesting one, and it's nothing to do with the time period either. Or like, Day the Earth Stood Still, I think, is one of the best sci-fi movies of all time, and that came out the same year as this. Forbidden Planet, that came out around the same time. I think that's you would agree.
That one's fantastic.
Yeah, that's one of the best movies of that time period. Or if you want, like, as far as movies with like UFOs, I think Earth vs. the Flying Saucers is better than this. That came out in 1956. It's just, even when I compare this to movies that came out around the same time, I just don't find it that interesting. Like, I think that's the criteria I'm using with it. It's just like, maybe in 1951 it was kind of like novel having an alien as the monster, but like by the time that decade was over, that concept had been done to death and had been done better just so many times. So John Carpenter's The Thing gets another
point.
How many more categories do we have?
2 more. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think the 50s one is going to win either of them.
Well, one of them it definitely won't. Okay, so the tone. Thing from Another World, it feels like a 50s sci-fi movie, basically.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of 50s sci-fi monster movies. This is what a lot of them are like. Very serious. Maybe too serious for its own good.
I will say a
lot of exposition.
I did like... Yeah.
Sorry.
I will say, I did like some of the atmosphere in the movie. Like I mentioned, when they first went out and found the flying saucer underneath the ice. When the monster was sort of first melting out, I thought that part was kind of creepy.
And then you find out I thought the whole thing Captain America.
Yeah. I found that the whole thing with the seed pods was pretty interesting. I thought the tone during that scene was pretty good, but
it has a few moments. I think part of what helps to give it any tension at all is the music. Like, the music has its moments. So. The part where they find the dead dog, I thought was effective.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of, either that or I was just really sad that a dog died. Can we do a movie where a dog doesn't die next? Can you promise me that?
Actually, I forget. Does a dog die in the next movie that we're doing?
I can't remember. I hope not. Because we've had there's 2 movies in a row here where dogs dies. Oh boy. But yeah, a lot of 50s movies are like this. It just there's a lot of like unsubtle anti-communist messages.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do like some 50s sci-fi horror movies. I mean, Day the Earth Stood Still, I mentioned earlier. That's great.
We've talked a bit about Forbidden Planet, which that one just has an amazing atmosphere.
You want one that's a little more like this? Creature from the Black Lagoon is entertaining, so there's that one. Because that one's a little bit more like this, where it's like a monster going around dispatching people. There are some jokes, but they're not that funny, so, I mean...
I can't even remember any off the top of my head. I just remember they weren't very good.
There was that weird octopus line. I remember that. There was the bondage scene. Like, it's just okay. I basically just remember, banter and like playful flirting. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
And also, the characters didn't feel scared enough.
No, and that's something that I've mentioned throughout this is. Like, they don't feel like they've been taking it serious. They just walk around like, yes, reminds me of back during the war. And then that's like all they say about it.
Oh, that voice you did there, that was hilarious. I think my grandpappy saw the same thing a long time ago. Okay. But yeah, just, they might have even said that in the movie, word for word, for all I know. But it was just hard to care about anything when they're it's this really dire situation and they're just not acting like it's dire enough. So, okay. Do we even need to go over John Carpenter's The Thing at this point?
I feel like we've said a lot of there have been several categories we've already mentioned the tone of the 82 version, which is
basically it's very dark and depressing, which maybe that's why it turned people off so much. It's just it's maybe a little bit too nihilistic.
Although there are a few moments of levity throughout the film which are pretty funny.
Is it the most nihilistic movie we've done on the podcast?
It might be.
Escape from LA has a pretty...
Yeah, it has a really nihilistic ending.
I don't think it's quite as... I don't know if it's as nihilistic as this, though.
Yeah.
Because what happens in this one's pretty fucked up, like... Because the entire tone of it, it's just very grim and serious. Again, like a lot of John Carpenter movies, this one, it takes it to the next level. It's just, the tension in this thing is crazy. Like, it's like I said earlier, even during scenes where, like, nothing is happening, it feels really tense, you know?
Yeah.
But again, that's what John Carpenter's good at. I mean, just look at Halloween, you know? And even some of his lesser movies, like The Fog, that's not his best movie, but even that has some of the... I don't know if you've seen that one, but even that one has...
I haven't yet, no.
Even that one has some of the tension that he's known for. And just it captures the situation, it captures the setting very well, and the way the characters are, like, playing off of each other. They all feel trapped and scared and, like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
You know? It's another movie that's kind of funny to watch after COVID happened, you know?
Yeah, after living through a pandemic.
Yeah, the people in this, they really could have used some social distancing, you know? And like you said, there are bits of humor here and there, but it never felt like they were overdoing it. It always felt like it was played, because the humor in it was coming more from character moments rather than jokes, you know? It was coming from how the characters interacted with each other, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it revealed something about the character's personality, you know. But yeah, so I'm gonna give it to the 1982 one. Like, it's
Same.
Also, importantly, it's very, very scary, especially if you've never seen it before.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. Okay. Now this last Corey. This last category is very interesting. So, accuracy to the source material. Now, these are both based on a 1938 sci-fi novella called Who Goes There?, which was written by John Campbell, who edited Astounding Science Fiction Magazine, which that's actually where a lot of famous sci-fi writers got their start. Including the big three, actually. The aforementioned Isaac Asimov, you know, Arthur C. Clarke, Robert Heinlein. You might know those names if you've read some sci-fi stuff. There is a longer version of it that was discovered a few years ago and published as Frozen Hell, but obviously neither movie version was based on the extended version because it wasn't published back then, so I'm not going to count that. And the longer version doesn't really add much anyway. So I thought that I had read this before, but I guess I misremembered, so I decided to read it. It's very short. It's like probably like can't be any more than like 60 pages.
Oh wow, that's super short.
The actual story, it actually is it's actually pretty good. Like, especially considering the time it was written. Like, it was a very, very unique concept to come out of the 1930s of all times. Now, as for which movie is more accurate, since you haven't read it, I'll just kind of go over what what happens, but it's actually no contest here.
Yeah, I read a bit about the novella, and it sounds like it's
Thing from Another World barely resembles the book. John Carpenter's The Thing, like, it basically shares the exact same premise. You know, it's shape-shifting alien killing people. Obviously, it was updated a bit because it was written in the 30s. This movie came out in the 80s. But it's the same plot. It's basically because what John Carpenter wanted to do, he wanted to make a direct adaptation of the short story instead of just redoing the 1951 movie, which is smart, actually. If you're going to do a remake, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
Although sometimes even that doesn't work, like the Shining miniseries. But anyway.
Yeah.
The characters' personalities, they're not quite the same, but a lot of the names are the same as in the John Carpenter one. Right down to MacReady, Copper, Blair, Norris.
Okay.
Unlike the movie, though, where it was like an ensemble thing, it's very clear in this one who the protagonist is in the book. Which is MacReady, you know, if you didn't know. The part with the guy's fingers, that's in the book. Okay. It turns into a dog, just like the John Carpenter movie. And also just the atmosphere of it, it felt way more like the John Carpenter movie. Reading it, I basically came away thinking about ice and charred flesh, which is the John Carpenter
much more the
movie.
82, yeah. It sounds like The Thing from Another World was a very loose adaptation. Like, it took a couple of beats earlier on, like finding the alien, the spacecraft, in the snow. But other than that, it was pretty different.
The only thing the 1951 one shares with this is the setting. There's an alien in it, there's scientists and dogs, but like almost nothing that happens in that movie resembles the story. And then while researching this, I realized that there was another adaptation of this story, and it's unbelievably a movie I've seen before, and I didn't realize. It's called Horror Express, and it stars Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. And the difference with that is that it's set on a train. But I don't really remember it. Maybe I have to watch it again, but I don't remember it sharing much with the book.
And then one other thing I'd like to point out, there's an episode of The X-Files that borrows pretty heavily on the premise from the book and from the 82 movie.
It's not about that. Is it that episode where the dude like stretches and goes through grates?
No, I think it's from the same season though. Basically, Mulder and Scully go to, it's either the Arctic or the Antarctic, where they found some like parasite or bacteria in the ice.
I think I know what episode you're talking about, actually.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I've seen the X-Files, but that was like somewhere hidden in the back of my brain somewhere. So
yeah, it's a season 1 episode even.
Yeah, I saw a lot of season 1 episodes, so I that one I most likely saw. I can barely remember
it's a worm that like
but I remember the setting, and I remember there was like a weird alien creature. Yeah, it kind of was like that, actually, now that I think about it, huh? I never made that connection for some reason. But yeah. Was it based, directly off of that? Like, what was the title of the episode again?
Ice.
Not Vanilla Ice.
No. But there's
an idea for a future podcast.
Yeah.
Do you want to do Cool as Ice, the Vanilla Ice movie?
Please no.
I'm not watching that again. It's fine. I'm not that crazy. I'm crazy, but I'm not that crazy. Sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here. But yeah, okay, it does say on the Wikipedia page it was based on... Okay, it was partly based on like a science article, but yeah, it was based on Who Goes There.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do actually remember that. I was surprised. I actually do remember that episode, just vaguely.
Because I remember watching that episode for the first time going, this feels a lot like The Thing.
It was a lot scarier than X-Files episodes usually are, so that should have been...
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this weird, like, worm creature or something that, like, goes in their... Doesn't it, like, go in their ears or something?
Something, and it makes them hyper-aggressive towards one another.
Well, just bringing up Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan again. That happens in Wrath of Khan. Khan has these like worms they like puts in people's ears that like to torture them or something. We got off track again. Would you believe it?
Yeah. Anyway,
the story. Okay, I guess there are some differences. So. It's nowhere near as gory as the John Carpenter movie. I think that's a given.
Yeah.
Also, neither of the movies get the look of The Thing, right? It's described, in the book, it's described as having tentacles. And I think it's like blue or something. So it does...
Huh.
It kind of looks like a creature that H.P. Lovecraft created. Huh, that's interesting. So it's not a plant monster, neither is it a weird spider creature.
Okay.
And the Thing is also telepathic, which isn't really explored in either movies, but...
That's pretty interesting, actually.
That would probably be hard to do, though. They'd have to have it be like David Lynch's Dune, where like you hear its thoughts or something. It's just... That was a mistake. The ending is different from the movie. Both of them, actually. 3 of them survive, including MacReady.
Okay.
And they actually successfully kill the thing with a flamethrower. And apparently it was the thing was in the process of building an anti-gravity device to escape.
Huh.
But did not succeed. So it's less nihilistic than the John Carpenter movie. So there's that.
Yeah.
There's also way more people at the base in the book. It says there's 37.
Ooh, yeah, that's honestly a little closer to the 1950s movie.
But not all of them get names. So yeah.
Okay, that's good at least. It's not too.
And this is off topic, but there's a short story based on the John Carpenter movie. I mentioned this when we weren't recording, but there's a story that it's like a short story told from the perspective of the thing called The Things, and it's actually kind of interesting. But yeah, the winner is obviously John Carpenter's The Thing. It basically followed the story pretty well. It did diverge a bit, but it gets like the main plot beats at least. So there's that. So yeah, the winner is the 1982 movie. So how many points apart were these?
Yeah,
two
this is
movies?
rough. So, The Thing 1982 wins with an astounding 13 out of 15 points.
Oh god, I was wondering how bad it would be. Thing from Another World, I think, only had 2 points.
Yeah.
Oh my god, ouch.
Absolutely steamrolled.
We almost didn't have to do this fight. I knew that was... I had a feeling that was going to be the outcome. So that might be the... I think that's the biggest percentage any of these have gotten to. Because let's see, that's 13 out of 15. That is 87%. Before that, the highest one was Mortal Kombat, the 1995 one. Got 69% of the points.
Wow.
So yeah.
Pretty one-sided.
Yeah, John Carpenter's The Thing is like the champion currently, as far as those go. Yeah, that was not a fair fight. Next time, we're gonna have to choose... I think the problem with these matchups so far has been, like... Most of them, it's been way too obvious which one is the preferred. Well, actually... Well, this one was definitely the most obvious, as far as, like, which one I prefer. Okay, yeah, we should probably wrap this up now. So, yeah, what did we learn from this Two Movies Enter episode?
It is possible for one movie to just be better than the other movie. In, like, every single way.
All things are equal, but some things are more equal than others. I feel like we said the word thing, like, so many times during this podcast.
Yeah. Speaking of things, the next thing that we're going to cover is John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, this is a weird one. I never knew what to make of this movie, and I feel like it'll be
interesting to see again.
And then the next podcast after that is also a John Carpenter movie. And I think after we're through with this, he'll be like the one... Or no, wait. Well, he'll be up there. He'll be one of our most recurring directors. Hasn't quite beaten Sam Raimi yet, but he's getting there. Yeah. So yeah,
until then, roll the Andy Griffith.
Yeah, roll the clip.
Good night, you stupid idiot. Good night, you miserable slob.